So Revelation wants us to see that God is really the Lord of this world, and other people may claim to be Lord of this world, but it's really God. But there are forces in the world, spiritual forces and natural forces in the world. By natural, I mean like human forces in the world that are opposed to God. If we turn to chapter 12, we see some of this. We get a dragon and two great beasts. The dragon appears in connection with a pregnant woman. And John tells us who the dragon is in 12:9. He says the dragon is Satan. Then the dragon, it says, well, let me back up to verse 7. No, let's back up to verse 4. Okay. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. The dragon stood before the woman who was about to bear a child so that he might devour her child as soon as it was born. And she gave birth to a son, a male child, who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. This is the Messiah and the Lion of David. And Satan didn't want the Messiah to be born, and tried to prevent that happening. But her child was snatched away and taken to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, so that she can be nourished for 1,260 days. How many years is 1,260 days?
3.5.
3.5. Now,
broken number.
Yeah, right. It's a broken number, and it's half of 7. 7 is a number that symbolizes perfection in Revelation. 3.5 symbolizes imperfection. And a war broke out in heaven in verse 7. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back, but they were defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. The dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who was called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. This is where we get the idea, the Christian idea, that Michael threw Satan out of heaven, that Satan and his angels were cast out of heaven. So, when the dragon saw that he'd been thrown down to earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. This is a symbol of Christian persecution, essentially, that the forces that are against the Christians are empowered to do that by Satan. Okay, now, then we get this first beast. The dragon took his stand on the sand of the seashore in 13, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads. The symbolism in this is really thick, okay? One of the heads, it says, has been dealt a death blow and a mortal wound which was healed. I could go into a lot of different reasons for this, but this beast is symbolic of the Roman Empire. The head that had been dealt a death blow, a mortal wound which had been healed, that probably represents Nero, who committed suicide in 68. So let me read something from Pilgrim on this, okay? To many of his subjects, Nero's tyranny was obvious and hated. In his case, the true nature of the beast became more apparent than usual. Toward the end of Nero's reign, there were serious revolts in his provinces. His death was followed by the chaotic year of 4 emperors. But the imperial power recovered with the Flavian dynasty. When Vespasian there was chaos after Nero died. And a few different people tried to ascend to the office of emperor, and it just didn't, they died. And when Vespasian took the throne, Vespasian was a very capable, he was a military man. And when he took the throne, this established what was called the Flavian dynasty. And that really cemented the place, that put the role of the emperor back at the center of the empire, and it secured it. From the brink of collapse, it emerged as apparently invincible, so that according to the vision, the whole world cried, "Who is like the beast, and who could fight against it?" The point to the absolutizing of political and military power, which was expressed in the worship of Rome and the Roman emperors. Okay, now, look at verse 7. It was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. So when you're starting to have Christian martyrs here, martyrs to the Roman Empire, it's not a full-bore persecution, but you're starting to get Christian martyrs. And it was given authority over every tribe and people and language and nation. That's the Roman Empire. It was a vast empire that had control over what seemed to be the whole world. And the inhabitants of the earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb that was slaughtered. So there is at this time what's called an imperial cult. And there's a goddess called Roma, deified Rome. And there are also cults to the emperor. People worshipped the emperor like the emperor was a god. And it wasn't necessarily something that the emperor himself tried to get people to do. It just happened. It would have happened with different high-status people at different times. And in 13:10, here is a call for the endurance of the saints. You see, the Christians are starting to suffer because of the dissonance with the Roman Empire. And people are saying, wow, who is like the beast? Who is like the empire? Who can fight against it? It's too strong. We're nothing. We can't do anything. Then, as if the first beast wasn't bad enough, we get a second beast. And notice verse 12 kind of tells you what the second beast is. If the first beast is the empire, then the second beast, it says, it exercises all authority of the first beast on its behalf, and it makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast. And so this is probably the imperial cult. It makes people worship Rome or the emperor as a god. Look at verse 18. This calls for wisdom. Let anyone with understanding calculate the number of the beast, for its number is the number of a person, its number is 666. Now, heavy metal albums aside, what this is it's numerology. Okay, so it would be very common in the ancient world for people to express a person's name in numbers like this, because you didn't have numerals. In the ancient world, you expressed numbers with letters. And so this, the problem is, we don't know whether to add up the numbers in Hebrew or Latin or Greek. But in Greek, the name Neron Caesar will add up to 666. And so it's probably Nero that this is referring to, who was really nasty to Christians. He blamed a fire in Rome that he himself may have set on Christians, and then persecuted them by using them as human torches to light the city at night. Okay. Now, what Revelation is predicting here is that there's going to be martyrdom. There's going to be martyrdom because the beast wants to occupy the position that God occupies. The emperor wants to be God. But the Lord of this world, the only one really worthy to sit on the throne is God. It's not the emperor. And Christians know this, and they can't compromise on this. And so they're going to die. And so we get a lot of symbolic numbers in Revelation. Let me see here. Yeah. 7 and multiples of 7 show up throughout the book a lot. And 3.5 shows up every time something's going wrong. So 7 is the number of completeness. And if it's 3.5, God's plans haven't been fulfilled yet. The name of Jesus shows up 14 times in Revelation. And in 7 of these instances, it occurs in the phrase, the witness of Jesus, or witnesses of Jesus. The word Christ occurs 7 times in Revelation. After 7, 4 is the symbolic number that shows up most commonly. 7 is the number of completeness, and 4 is the number of the world. John has a fourfold designation for the world. He calls it peoples and tribes and languages and nations. And lamb, the word lamb, shows up 28 times in Revelation, 7 times 4. 7 of these instances occur in the phrases coupling God and the lamb together. So you can see that numbers in Revelation are really important. And we're supposed to learn things by the number that John uses. The numbers aren't supposed to be taken literally. The numbers express a theological point. The number 144,000 that we get in chapter 14 is a symbolic number based on the number 12. Okay, questions about this so far? I know that I'm going through this really fast. Now, we can't get into all, it would take, months for us really to work our way through Revelation. There's so much here. It's such a dense text. There's so much symbolism. But here's what I want you to get, okay? Everything bad and everything good happening on earth have corresponding causes in heaven, the way in which Revelation sees things. That the persecution of Christians is from Rome, but standing behind Rome is the power of Satan. And the witness of the martyrs is standing behind the martyrs is the power of God. So even if they're killed on the earth, they're going to have victory through their martyrdom, and they're going to be saved. God is the Lord of this world. And other people might come along and say they're the Lord of this world, but they're not. Only God is. And Jesus has already won the battle when He died on the cross. Now, Satan, who is the main culprit in Revelation, beginning in chapter 12, is going to be defeated. And after Satan is defeated, and all of Satan's forces are brought down, then this is going to culminate in chapter 21, where John says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them as their God. They will be His people, and God Himself will be with them. He will wipe away every tear from their eye. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away.' And the one who is seated on the throne, we're back to chapter 4 now, the first image we get from this vision. The one who is seated on the throne said, "See, I am making all things new." Now, what this is getting at is there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. Or it might be better to say heaven and earth are going to be renewed. It's like what Paul says, in Christ there's a new creation. But it's not just you and I who are the new creation. Christ hasn't just redeemed us. Christ has redeemed everything. Christ has redeemed the whole universe. Amen. And so now, because of what Christ has done, there will be a new heaven, a renewed heaven and earth. And the distance that exists between them now, okay, because we don't really see the spiritual world around us all the time. I mean, there's some people that have this gift, but most of us don't. But it says, when heaven and earth are made new, the home of God is going to be among the mortals. And He will dwell with them as their God. So heaven and earth, the new heaven and the new earth, are going to be brought together. There's not going to be any distance between them anymore. Earth is going to be like heaven. Heaven's going to be like earth. And God is going to wipe away every tear from their eyes. God is making all things new. Just as God created all things, God is going to recreate all things. God is going to renew all things. God's in the renewal business. So in Christ there is a new creation that goes not just for you and for me, but for the world around us, and even for heaven. There's a new creation. And that's really where Revelation is leading. Even though we get all this stuff about dragons and beasts and battles and blood and guts and all this other stuff, where Revelation is going is toward a new heaven and a new earth where they come together and the home of God is among the mortals. So things may seem bad now, but someday heaven and earth are coming together. And we won't have this distance from God anymore that's been created by sin. And that's Revelation. There's a lot more we could talk about, but I think I want to just end it there.